Hi friends, welcome back to my lockdown diaries. This is Shashwat here. These diaries are a collection of my thoughts and experiences as we live through these lockdown days, which is right now lockdown 4.0. There are already reports that it will go into 5.0 and then God knows in how many 6.0, 7.0, God knows how that's going to translate. But while we are coping with the whole lockdowns and the openings up and all these different aspects of quarantine, there's something else that is also bearing down on us. While we didn't have the coronavirus was not sufficient enough, the scorching summers are also creating a bit of a problem, especially for North India. So you have right now a heat wave that is stretching across the northern belt. So you have states like Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, parts of Punjab and all, Maharashtra as well, grip of a heat wave. Yesterday, Churu in Rajasthan recorded a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. That was the hottest place on earth. And that's just one for the record. We are seeing a constant rise of these temperatures. Typically a heat wave is said to be, the definition of a heat wave is a constant temperature hovering over 40 degrees Celsius in the plains and over 30 degrees Celsius in the hills, kind of a thing. So we are seeing those 40 plus temperatures all across north of India. In fact, Delhi a day before yesterday recorded 47 degrees Celsius, which was the hottest in 17 years. So you are seeing this happening all across. I recall seeing a satellite image right now, which was color coded to give an impression of the kind of temperature it was. So if you see that image, you'd feel almost like the whole of North India is burning at the moment. And while it's very easy for us to extrapolate the reasons for it and talk about it in a very scientific manner, the actual on the ground it's the scenario is pretty dreary and dark. So and touching upon the whole issue of heat wave, over the past couple of years, the decades, possibly decade or so, the heat waves are getting stronger and stronger. So if you see all these linkages that have been made with climate change, that it is said that as we move on into a very 2 degrees plus increased world, which is being predicted by the IPCC and a lot many other think tanks and scientists across the world, these kind of natural occurrences will only get very commonplace. So you'll have all these heat waves, which will be a regular affair. You'll have all these climatic conditions like catastrophes like droughts, floods, and all these things are gonna get very common. And it's not only India that is suffering. So if you see right now, as we are talking about the heat waves in northern India, in fact in California also, in US also, they are similarly suffering in their own way regarding the whole heat wave that is there. In fact, if I recall right, in 2014 there was a massive heat wave that struck all across Europe. It killed as many as 10,000 people in France, if I'm not wrong. So you have this, heat waves are becoming common across the globe. In California, these kind of climatic conditions result in the forest fires that you have. Last year, if you see the forest fire which burned through Australia, for that matter, for many months in Australia, if you recall, it was prompted by the long summers that were there that preceded the forest fire itself. So whenever you have these kind of things, there's always a domino effect where you have one thing resulting into something else. So, and we are seeing that thing all across the globe. Heat waves are not very unusual in India. So I have had the chance of spending many summers in the northern India belt. So I've lived across the cities of Delhi. I've spent many summers in Varanasi, of course, Allahabad, Lucknow, and not many the North Indian cities myself. And there's I have seen the whole phenomena of heat wave from a very personal perspective. So I'll give you an example. So when we were younger, one of the most discerning traits of the heat wave is something called as a loo. It's pronounced as loo as in English, but we actually refer to as loo. It's a current of hot air which is typically there, it comes post noon, so from somewhere around 12 to 1 p.m. to around 4 p.m. there will be a current of hot air which will be there all across the northern belt and cities and all. So what you need to do at that time is, to escape it, you have to keep stay in a shaded place, or stay inside your homes. So I remember when we were kids and all, and even when I was working for that matter, we would be cooped inside our places while this whole loo business would be going on outside. And once that is passed, that's when you'd come out again. If you compare this with the heat, Mumbai is also getting hotter by the day, so we are also touching somewhere around 39-40. In cities like Mumbai and Kolkata, the scenario is very much different. So we have the biggest problem right in these cities is not the temperature, is the humidity. So what happens is, if you are in a city like Lucknow for that matter, right, the heat wave you can escape it through sitting in a shaded place, and you would feel much better. The difference between the discomfort in outside and inside is very stark, while that's not the case in Mumbai. So if the temperatures rise here because of the humidity, you can't escape that. You are sweating all the time, even if you are sitting inside the home. So that's a major difference between the heat in North India and the rest of the places. I remember when I used to be in Delhi, I was working with the express at that moment, and I had to commute. So after I would get down from one of those public buses and all, I would walk down to the office in ITO. That little 100-200 meters of walk, in those summers I had an afternoon shift at those times, it would be terrible. You would get dehydrated, you would get exhausted, you would feel so much weak at that moment. But the moment you stepped into the office and you had a 5 minutes of rest and all, you'd be normal again. You had those drinks and all. So the trick here is to keep yourself hydrated. So that's why you have all those fascinating pumped up carts in Delhi, water carts which are ubiquitous all around, and they keep supplying you with water. So that's how that would be there. There's no option for you to stay inside. We are not, of course, like the Mughals that were there in the past, who could shift their capitals to the scenic places in Kashmir and or create fancy charbags where they would live in complete luxury. So we can't have those kind of luxuries at our disposal. Neither are we like the Britishers, right? So if you see, the whole concept of hill stations in India has been prompted by these summers. So you have hill stations like Shimla, you have Dehradun, you have Dalhousie, you have Matheran, you have all these places which are there, right, Mussoorie and all, which have been created as a summer retreat by the Britishers, who are unable to cope up with the tropical temperature of India. So, and that is very interesting, because if you really dig into our ethos, right, if you dig into our past, we had devised our own natural mechanisms. We had devised our own natural ways in which we would deal with all these occurrences, the summer's temperatures that would be there. So if I could briefly mention that there are three basic ways in which we dealt with the heat waves for that matter. So I'm only talking about heat waves, so I'll just delve on that. So one was the architectural, of course. So you would have all these fancy Hawa Mahals, in like the one that you have in Jaipur, or you would have all those jalidar palaces that would be there, those jalis that would be there, which would be constructed in a manner which would aid the airflow. So there was a lot of attention that was paid in ensuring that the flow of air was even between the buildings and all, and then even the materials that were used would be very much different. I remember in one of my archaeological trips that I had made some years back in Osmanabad, and there was this whole amazing palace that was there, and the room for the princely king, the room for them was in the Tehkana, which is it was below the ground level, because if you go a bit deeper into the ground, a couple of feet deeper, it gets cooler. So you had all these architectural mannerisms, ways and mechanisms in which you would deal with these heat. So if you see Red Fort also, if you walk across the Red Fort, you'll see these very small tiny canals that are etched all across the surfaces, which is because you would have these water flowing and they will act as a natural coolant. The second response we would have is, of course, food. And so if you see, as I said, one of the primary mechanisms to deal with the heat wave is through food, and the best way to do is to be hydrated. So you have all these fanciful stuff coming in, like panna would be there. It was made of raw mangoes, that is there. You would all have it, chas would be there. You would have something, lassis would be there. You would have different kind of shikanjis. That would be the lemon drinks to keep yourself hydrated. And then even food, like at this moment in time, you would have like the kakri, the cucumber. That's a very different kind of cucumber that you get. It's very thin and kind of long, elongated. It's in the northern belt is called as Majnu ki pasli and Leila ki ungli kind of a thing. So you would have all these things which would be readily available all across the all across the terrain to aid you in coping up with these things. And finally, the third mechanism that we would deal with would be our clothing. See, if you see the traditional clothing that was there, all the kurtas, the pajamas, the dhotis, were very much aligned with the tropical conditions of India. They were airy, they were loose. In many ways you can say the dhotis are very much air conditioned, right? The dhotis and the lungis, they help in recirculation of air. Unlike the western wear that we have, right? The denims and the pants and the trousers and the jackets, they are not really meant for the Indian climatic conditions. So these were the ways and manners in which we would do it. This is a time, long before we would be dependent on things like ACs. Like right now, our whole complete dependency is on ACs to deal with this crisis. But we would, back in those days, we would deal with it on multi levels, right from food to our clothing to changing our lifestyles a bit to changing our own daily routines for that matter. So we would deal in a multifarious ways, and that would really help us to cope up with all these things. I remember back in those days, till sometime recent, I should say, there used to be this whole thing about the desert coolers. These were big machines, almost like coolers that you have right now, but they used to have this khas mats, straw mats made out of khas, which would be fragrant. So one of your duties would be to fill up those coolers with water, and they would circulate the cool air during the oppressive noon time temperatures. That would be the noon time when the temperatures would be really off the charts. So at that time you would have all these these desert coolers would be humming across all the homes, different homes which could afford them, of course, and they would be much economical. They would consume much less electricity than our fanciful air conditioners do. In fact, our air conditioner, if we are to really pay attention, they create something, they take the heat out from your homes and they throw it outside, which only aids in increasing the temperature outside. There's something called as the heat island impact. What it actually does is, if you see all these malls and also all these malls which are heavily air conditioned, and all these places, offices which are heavily air conditioned, around them, a certain radius around them, you'll have the temperatures would be higher than normal. That is because of the heat island impact that is there, and we see this very much happening in these summer months. So if you see in Delhi, if I'm not wrong, yesterday, while the temperatures were also the highest in these 17 years, it was also the day in this year when the maximum amount of power was consumed, 163 gigawatts across the northern belt, of course. So you're having this correlation between heat, air conditioning, promotion of the whole explosion in terms of the emissions of carbon and all these things because of the power consumption and everything. So there's a vicious circle that has been created, which only promotes it's while it's something harmful for everyone, it also promotes a kind of a scenario which will be detrimental for the days to go ahead. So that in that sense, heat waves are something that we need to learn to live with. Going forward, we'll have more of these things, and I'm sure there has been a lot of studies undertaken in this regard I remember some years back, the government was also talking about how we can, creating a paper on how we can deal with this. The best way I think so we can deal with is, the best way to deal is, of course, with the hopes in the horizon that are coming in. The southern western monsoon that has, we are seeing those blossoming of those dark clouds. In fact, some of them I saw them earlier in the morning today as well. So that is the only way that could break this cycle of heat and summers. So as we move forth, as the rains come in from Kerala and stretch all across India, the heat wave for this year would be past, and we can move. We can again then get back into our old cycle of life. So on that note, on that hopeful note, I'll like to, I'll leave you on that. I'll catch you again tomorrow. Till then, stay safe, stay inside, and don't forget to wash your hands. Thank you.